without the cuts, nothing's going to be resolved. It's just stealing from future generations. It is morally irresponsible to steal from your kids. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Gap Fillers podcast. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe to help support the podcast. So let's get started here. As of this recording, we are in day number 2 of the government shutdown. This is always a much bigger, people make it out to be a much bigger deal. The government shutdown. Sounds like a very dangerous thing, right? The economy's going to collapse. The military is going to, not going to be paid and things like that. So, what is a government shutdown? Well, every year, the start of the fiscal year, which tends to be October 1st, what we've started our fiscal year at for some reason. It's the time where our government has to have an appropriation of funds to fund the government for the next year. And what actually happens is the government goes into this kind of it's a self, almost like a default mode where most of the non-essential programs shut down. So like national parks and a lot of the non-essential government programs are and employees are put on furlough. Who is not affected? That is the big question. Number one, VA benefits still go out. So if you're on a government pension or if you're on disability, especially particularly through the VA, you are not affected. Number two is Social Security. It's not affected. You still get your Social Security check through the proper channels. People who claim otherwise are fear-mongering, and that in particular is really what this whole fight is about. So, all right. So the history of government shutdowns, real quick. So, since 1976, which is really when the modern budget process has happened, 20 times. The government has shut down 20 times. All right, with the longest being 30 days, this in Trump's first term, beginning December 22nd through January 25th. Why did it come to that? Why is it in October? Well, Congress can pass something called a CR, a continuing resolution. And what that does, it funds the government for a short period of time and kicks the can down the road in order to allow for negotiations to take place. Now, if you're ever in a negotiation, what you want to do is you kind of, especially in political negotiations, the key is to make yourself look better than your opponent, because you don't win by giving your opponent, especially like if I'm a Republican, you don't win by giving the Democrats what they need without taking something in return, right? So, they'll always claim, politicians love to claim that we're doing it for the American people and we're doing it for this and we're doing it for that. And I don't want people to get hurt. I don't want people to get laid off. So that's why they're doing it. Well, if they couldn't publicize that, they wouldn't do it, because that's the nature of the political beast. All right. So, October 1st is the start of the fiscal year. So we have they had pretty much the entire year to know this was coming. Well, like I said in previous podcasts before I was here, you see my beautiful face. That I think this was back in March or April. Don't hold me to that. There was a huge thing about the raising the debt ceiling. All right, and the debt ceiling is a whole different tactic to force a negotiation. So if there wasn't really these fear or these painful moments, the government would continue on running. Now there are two things to remember. Okay, so. Very rarely do the continuing resolutions or the appropriations bills ever reduce the deficit. They usually shift funding from one place to another. So right now, the Democrats' big fight is over the ACA benefits and subsidies. Okay, these were new subsidies that were brought in under the Biden administration. Now that funding is introduced, it very rarely ever goes away. People, like I said, it will shift, but it will never reduce spending. The Republicans are usually, for higher military spending. They're usually for tax breaks or something of that nature. Now, this is one of the few times that the Democrats aren't pushing for higher taxes, but a bigger deficit. Now, it's still going to raise the deficit, no matter who wins this budget fight. Rand Paul had a 1 penny plan, right? So it's basically a 1% cut across the board as a start to reducing the deficit, right? So even if you were to freeze government spending, that would be much better than what they have on the table today, because eventually, over a long period of time, the economy will catch up with this massive deficit. It's $2 trillion. That's the size of the deficit. So $2 trillion a year. It's 1.8. $2 trillion more spent by the government than taken in. Well, if you were to cut all of the military spending, that still wouldn't get you there. If you were to cut a lot of government programs, it still wouldn't get you there. Why? Because we have almost $1 trillion now of deficit interest spending. Okay, so now that we have such a large deficit, for every $1 trillion we have to pay between an extra $30 billion to $50 billion in just interest alone. Well, the government, I forget the last time I looked at it, it was at 38, I believe. So that means it's close to it. It's nearing $1 trillion worth of interest payments on the national debt alone. So that alone makes up half the deficit. And then you could find out another 800 billion or whatever to cut. But that's never going to happen because, frankly, it hurts the politicians' popularity. So if I live in Alabama, say, I'm not going to cut Huntsville space program spending, but in doing so, I need to cut somewhere else to balance the budget. Well, that doesn't happen because then you'll lose somebody from New York, say, and then you lose somebody from that. In fact, that is why it is more beneficial to have a balanced Democrat-Republican representative base, because then you bring in the most money, because you'll never get cuts from the Republicans in your state and you'll never get cuts from the Democrats. And so these dominated states that are either like almost completely Republican or almost completely Democrat, they very rarely have to compromise in order to please their state as a whole. So we talked about the Rand Paul plan. We talked about who's affected by this. How does this resolve? Well, the Democrats are accusing the Republicans of refusing to negotiate over extending these ACA benefits. Okay, and what the Republicans want is to actually just continue the growth of of Biden's administration, besides the ACA. Benefit, the expanded benefits. So why is this important? Well, there are members in the military are currently serving without pay, so they'll be back paid eventually when the appropriation bill is passed. Eventually, this will cause morale issues and issues within that part of the government, and both parties will try to use that as a negotiation tactic. And really what ends up happening is people stop paying attention. People who don't pay attention to politics will come in and say, well, just fund the government. Okay, who's going to pay for it? Well, whoever. The problem is that we have failed to take responsibility, particularly over the last 25 years, really since the year 2000, 2001, is when the deficit ballooned. All right, so we are technically in peacetime. We shouldn't be spending this much on military. Well, you have to because of national defense. Fine, but no country has been able to sustain wartime military spending through peace. It's an amazing way to bankrupt yourself. In fact, that's one of the ways that we bankrupted the Soviet Union, through that and other spending programs. And basically, we were able to outmaneuver them because of our large burgeoning economy throughout the 20th century. So how is this resolved? Well, frankly, one person has to give. Usually, this is what it's going to come down to is something called a continuing resolution, as discussed before. Kick the can down the road and allow both parties to claim victory and maneuver to gain political points, probably through the end of the year. Now, I stated this before in my previous podcast that talked about the budget, is that without the cuts, nothing's going to be resolved. It's just stealing from future generations. It is morally irresponsible to steal from your kids. So people like to say, I paid into Social Security. I deserve my Social Security benefits. Well, you didn't pay in enough. You didn't have enough kids to make up for that deficit. The way the economy is structured does not allow for the amount of benefits that are put out. Something has to give. Now, some people will say, "Oh, we got to tax the rich." Fine, you can tax the rich. Elon Musk just passed $500 billion net worth. Fine, you take all that away from him. You don't even satisfy this year's deficit. So there are major problems within the mindset of the American citizen, and to put it back on us, the people, is how we have issues budgeting ourselves. Most people don't keep a budget. Most people don't know how to spend their own money, and we're confused on why our politicians don't. So somebody has to give. I think usually what ends up happening is because the Republicans try to say no, but eventually end up saying yes because it is more damaging politically. Now, they seem to have gained some moxie, if you will, about being able to stand up against this, against additional spending. We'll see how that goes. One of the major things, though, that will come out of this is that Doge will get its mandatory cuts. That's really what I think is kind of Trump's angle on this, is that Trump views this as a win-win situation. Either he gets the Democrats to cave to his demands, or he's able to reduce the size of the government. So with that, I'd like to thank you for joining me for this episode of the Gap Fillers podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.